Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be on. I've wanted to do this with you for a while.
Well, I mean, I hope you're not daunted by the fact that you are my first guest on the launch of the Bank Nerd Corner podcast for a little show that I'm calling Bankers Hours, where I chat with bankers about, them as people, but also where, they see the industry going. And I think you have a lot to say about this, so I thought you'd be a great first guest.
Well, thanks for having me. I think I feel like you should sign something for me or something.
Yeah, I'll get you some merch. It'll be signed. It'll commemorate this very special recording.
Hopefully we can get a million views or a million followers. You can remember me.
Absolutely. So I feel like I've known you for a couple of years and I'm a big fan of your writing, but people might not know who you are. Tell me about yourself and something banker colleagues might not know about you.
Sure. So Chris Nichols, SouthState Bank. I've been with the bank about 14 years, 67 billion, 66 billion, and growing, very acquisitive, focused on organic growth these days. Lots going on. Director of Capital Markets, handle a variety of capital markets activity, innovation, and fintech investment. So I'm all over the place and I get myself in everyone's business. So it's kind of fun. And I can't believe they let me do it. So.
Well, what does the Director of Capital Markets do? Because honestly, if I had to give you that job title, that's not the title I would give you. I always think of capital markets as like the trading floor, right?
Yeah, so it used to be a former chief strategy officer, but as we grow bigger and bigger, you have to have some specialty.
Yeah.
And capital markets was my background for a while, so handle hedging for the bank and all things derivatives, so commodities, foreign exchange, things like that.
Oh, interesting. I kind of thought that was the finance office, but maybe in some of these banks it's not.
Capital markets. But then, in addition, on this. With my spare time, I handle, again, fintech investment, fund investment for us, fintech partnerships, dabble in innovation. And so I usually support other business lines coming up with new ideas and new innovation strategies.
Did you get into those jobs because you were just interested in them? Or is there something about interest rate hedging that I'm not aware of that overlaps nicely with fintech investments?
No real overlap, so you're not missing anything. I just had spare time and a background in fintechs and bank technology, so I lend myself to that.
How did you get into banking?
So it was one of my summer jobs, did a variety of summer internships through high school and college. One of them was a bank. When I graduated, worked for Price Waterhouse, basically hired by the RTC, 80s, and basically thrown into doing forensic accounting for the failed thrifts, in particularly Arizona. Lincoln Savings was one of the clients through the RTC, and had a variety of S&Ls where I learned what not to do in banking and how fraud is perpetrated. So did that, and then went into bank, wanted to get into real estate and banking, and ended up in banking. So
wow, I can't believe you worked for the RTC. That's so it's the Resolution Trust Corp, and that was right, and that was like set up by either Congress or the regulators to clean up the savings and loan, right? I've only heard of it.
Savings and loan. They had all these defunct savings and loans that had assets and some liabilities they didn't exactly know. So I worked for Price Waterhouse. That was hired by the RTC to kind of figure out what happened and try to get money back and recoup it for the taxpayers. So we, as a forensic accountant, we traced the money back and figured out, where everything went, what assets we can get a hold of. So.
Oh, that's so funny, Chris. I'm totally working on a piece about how fraud leads to bank failures, and I'm learning so much about the ways that an executive, if they wanted to, could fail their own bank, and looking up different failures that are iconic. And I was looking up Keystone, or First National Bank of Keystone, and I'm reading a book about kind of the shenanigans that the executives got into and how kind of it was quote unquote missed.
That's right. And it was either bad lending decisions or just outright insider fraud, normally by an executive, but not always.
Okay, so I am most familiar with your blog, Banker to Banker. I don't know if you call it a blog. I call it a blog.
Yep.
How did you come to write, and do you think of yourself as a writer?
Frustrated writer. I would like more time on writing. Normally, those pieces are slapped together with a stream of consciousness that I wish I had more time. Unlike, I think, some of your work, that I think is really beautiful. I just try to cover a lot of topics. It's really my therapy, either to do research and to get stuff that I'm interested in, that I want to learn about, or, I figured I'd produce this piece anyway for an internal document, so I might as well make it an external document. But mostly it's stuff that I witness either at other banks or internally that I want to say something, and it's just not my time or place to say something, so I write about it.
Why does South State do a blog? Like, aren't you giving away your trade secrets?
So we have a couple of verticals. Correspondent banking is one of them, one of our oldest and most successful, I would say. Some 4,000 banks in our network, 1,400 active customers. And so, we exist to kind of help out other banks. We try to lift everyone up. And I'm a firm believer in, actually, one of the things that I discussed when coming to SouthState, Legacy SouthState, was that I'm going to give away. I'm going to talk a lot. I'm going to have reporters following my articles, and I'm going to be on the tape. And some of our not inside information, some of our public information is going to get out. And you may not feel great about it. And the understanding was that, yes, and my philosophy is the more I give away, the more I get. So one, it's a test of my ideas, because I get all sorts of people commenting on I'm right or wrong, and it helps validate some of the ideas. But also, I feel like the competition isn't the bank next door. It's really fintechs or a credit union or insurance company. They come from all areas, and so if one competitor gets my idea, I don't think it's that bad. And for the most part, what we talk about, things like pricing and deposit management, that if everyone did, I would just be happier that we'd have less deposit competition, less foolish stuff. And I think most of the problems we run into is just sheer ignorance, that banks don't have proper profitability models or deposit pricing models, and so misprice their assets and misallocate capital. When you're a writer, you kind of have to be part of the process. Like, you can't monopolize knowledge, in part because people don't monopolize their knowledge when they talk to you, and you kind of have to understand. For me as a writer, I kind of welcome the competition. I want to read art. I can't write every single article. A lot of my articles that I write are ones that I just wanted to read that I couldn't seem to find. So I had to go out and write it myself. But you're just part of the ecosystem. You can't, and I don't know if banks always feel that same way too, right? That you might have them be your competitor, but in some ways we can learn from each other too. And in banking, it's not anyone's great idea to lend. You know what I mean? There's only so much secrets a little bit. That's right. And I feel like I can always keep up with the competition. So if I give away one secret and someone steals it, well, fine. I'm going to, you're playing my game, right, and I'm always going to be ahead of you. So I'm not that worried about it if you're always relying on me for your ideas. But, for the most part, I got into this industry because I really love the people. And I think bankers are fantastic people at heart. And having been in various other industries, I can tell you that's not always the case. So I think for the most part, I love the intellectual curiosity, the intellectual integrity, the overall integrity, the ethics of our industry. And so very happy to promote it and support it wherever I can.
Well, you mentioned that some of your inspiration comes from either moments of frustration, or we're we went through a decision-making process. Here's some of the things that we thought about, but here's what's really replicable about that process. Or you're frustrated by things you see at other institutions. So how do you find inspiration, and how do you articulate that into a topic that with a takeaway?
Yeah, one of the times one of the things that drive me is the time that I was born at and came, the time we are right now, that unbelievable change in the industry, unbelievable data. In the last 20 years, our access to data has been amazing. And so inspiration is just at every turn, and it doesn't, talk to 40 plus banks a week, participate in many of our committees, whether it's AI or payments or what have you. And so ideas are right around the corner. I was hear, a problem. I'm like, how is this a problem in this day and age? Why does it take 5 to 7 days? Why are we, to wire, ACH money for a IRA account to reopen that up? Something near and dear to your heart.
I know. I just went through that and just got to ask myself.
I just read it. I just had the same experience with my mom. Mom, so when I read yours, I'm like, this is systemic. This is the problem.
Yeah. And honestly, so people talking about stablecoin, like I didn't have to wait 2 weeks to get all of my retirement money mailed to me. And then I turned around and mailed it to someone else. And I was like, no, we have like 1,000. I mean, we can talk about stablecoin because I know you just wrote about it, but I was like, we've got a lot of payment problems that need to be solved before a stablecoin payment problem use case presents itself to me, in my opinion.
Yep. So that's at every turn. So I have no shortage of topics, and I draw inspiration from a million things during the day, and I keep them all on a list and write them down. And then when I have time to research them or when they're topical, I bring them back up.
So how's your writing been received? I know that, you kind of communicated to the people who hired you that this was important to you, and you kind of saw, there might be some drawbacks, but in the long term, it was a good idea. Having written for a while, what's that been like?
Again, it helps me synthesize my ideas. So it's fantastic. Some people think visually. I really think by one of my earlier bosses always made me create boxes and arrows of anything I was talking about, and then made me write a narrative. And that is kind of at the core of my being, that whenever I have to think through a process, that's kind of where I start, is I draw it out with boxes and arrows and then write it down in a narrative. And if you can't explain it, then I can't teach it or I can't implement it. Right, I can't talk about it. I'm wasting times at meetings. So I always try to kind of put my thoughts in writing, and that's what happens. I think it's well received.
Yeah.
Hopefully, people aren't blowing smoke when they tell me they like it. And at the end of the day, if no one read it, I would still do it.
Right. I think in words. I talk. Right. I'm such a talker too. But coming up with a thesis statement is actually a really, really good exercise when you're kind of making arguments, or you're trying to do a takeaway or something, like to kind of think in a thesis of like a couple of sentences, right? But I think a lot of people could probably benefit from being like, what's my argument here, and how am I going to make that argument, right?
That's right. And I'm sure you have a similar process. That I always start like, what's the core idea? What's like worth my time writing about?
Yeah.
And then I immediately, once I figure that out, then I go take, what's my headline? And then what my ending is. Right?
I write my headline last. I can't do headlines at the beginning.
Yeah, I got to do it first. Sometimes I change it, but I got to figure out like that's got to like sum up and be the clickbait, if you will.
Yeah.
The catchy subject line that highlights my main sentence, and then I got to end on something. And usually the ending is unfortunately become my weakest part, but it used to be my strength.
You could always do what we do in journalism, which is the kicker quote. Just find one person's thing and then just slap that at the end. So you recently wrote that a SouthState analysis found 7.56% of all clients at a bank accounted for 80% of a bank's profits, and 48% of all clients generated close to zero or negative profits. And that banks could shed 90% of their least profitable clients and generate the same amount of profitability. I am haunted by that. I cannot believe we are like, one, I still can't believe that that's the makeup of clients at a bank. And two, I kind of can't believe like this is still like in the year 2025, this is still an analysis that is true. What don't bankers understand about customer profitability?
Well, bankers, I believe, don't have the tools to understand product profitability and customer profitability.
Okay.
And so, my theme throughout my career has, and I discovered this early on, the secret formula in banking that has never failed: sell more profitable customers, more profitable products.
Wow.
Right?
You're just giving away secrets today.
Giving away secrets, and everyone would say, of course, Chris, you want to sell more profitable products to more profitable customers. No doubt, everyone else does. But it's amazing how many times, like, I got to argue, like, that's not profitable, or that, this isn't, wires, checks, whatever it is. We're pushing wires. We see all this top line revenue. Every wire costs the bank, right? And that is an example of something that we don't think twice about, yet we don't know how to really price that product.
Yeah.
Or, how to market that product. And, something even the other side of that is treasury management is one of bank's most profitable products. And everyone, I think, knows that, but no one really understands how profitable. And so they don't market it. And it's amazing how little treasury management gets a formal marketing and sales plan in banking when that drives a lot of that profit. A lot of those 7.5% of those customers are in fact treasury management customers. And I can give you examples at every turn that we just don't think about it. And we keep customers on. We like to bank everybody in the community. And, my first question to a banker is like, who's not your customer? And if you can't tell me who your customer is not, then you don't know who your customer is, like who your target customer is. And then it usually means you have, probably break even or worse profitability.
Well, and I think it's really interesting too, because there's both you're too myopic and then you don't have broad enough vision. And, thinking a little bit about the data that kind of goes into well, how would you actually determine profitability? What's getting counted as a cost? And then, I once read something about, a bank customer hopefully would know how much they're paying across the relationship with the bank, right? So me with my credit cards, right? I know how much I pay in annual fees. And then I should also know how much benefits I get back, how much my bank has quote unquote paid me. And then, but I'm not sitting there around being like, well, I also get this much in interest and I get this much, but I do think that bank customers maybe have a better sense of what they're paying the bank than maybe the bank has a sense of what they're paying them,
Most banks wouldn't know the profitability or in cumulative lifetime profitability.
Yeah.
So, the largest banks do, and that drives some of their behavior. But for the most part, even small regional banks and down just don't have a handle on customer or profitability and don't understand the drivers of it.
Well, and it's a little strange to think about now because maybe in the future, or maybe in the past, you could have argued 10, 15 years ago, that would have been a harder analysis. Maybe you have too many customers. Maybe it wouldn't have been at an interval that made sense to undertake this work. But now, certainly, you can't argue that the tools don't exist. You can't argue that you don't have the data, right?
Yep. Tools and data, and we give away our profitability. I mean, you can have a profitability model for free, and I'm always surprised at banks that go no, we don't believe in it, or we don't, no one will ever use it. I'm scratching my head, lending is a tough one. Everyone's after a lending customer, and we have loan committees and chief credit officers and chief banking officers. But lending maybe 18% risk-adjusted ROE on a good day. A deposit customer is 300%. So, and we're spending all this time, but we don't understand that difference on an 18% ROE loan, a good loan that we'd all be happy with. That margin's actually pretty thin once you get right down to it over time.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you think, based on your writing or conversations or conference appearances, that you think bankers get wrong that you try to either argue or clear up with your writing?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it stems from profitability.
Sure.
But, I contend something that I just mentioned, that we have the value pyramid flipped on its head. We spend a whole lot of time on lending and loans, our least profitable product, where if you look at the base of that pyramid, it's really most ideas are driven by, most profit is driven by the employee. And we all know people are important, but I would challenge any bank to think back, how do you train your employees? How much do you spend on your employees? How much do you invest in your culture?
Yeah.
One thing that SouthState has done recently in the last decade that has been, I think, a change is invest in culture and make sure, we have enough get-togethers. And, I thank, my management team, and that if I want to get everyone physically together these days, no one bats an eye. Go ahead and spend X amount of money because it's worth it to build culture.
Yeah.
And I think it really pays off. So your employees are your most important part, and from there, then it's, your customers, and again, customer profitability, and then it's your, fee income generating lines, it's your deposits, and then your loans. And we spend most of the allocation of capital and resources on loans, and very little on their employee.
That's really interesting. How does tech fit into that? You didn't say tech at all.
Yeah, so tech's, I think, the overlay in the middle that, you're always trying to improve your efficiency. And if there's one thing, and I get asked this all the time, like, how do we improve earnings the fastest? And the answer is efficiency, technology. And usually that means, taking a old process, restructuring it, not just digitizing it, but restructuring the process, and then having a new and improved process with the enablement of technology. And, in this day and age with Gen AI unlocking traditional AI, machine learning, it's now easier to have Copilot write a Python script for you and analyze your data. Stuff that would take me weeks before, now I can do in minutes. So I have even more things to write about than ever, and more, insights to unlock in banking, because it's everywhere I turn.
Use AI in your writing at all?
I don't use AI. The answer is no, only because, and I've wanted to, and I try. That AI, that ChatGPT affect is just not only soulless, but it's also bugs me. It just rubs me the wrong way. And I can't watch an AI generated video, and I can't really watch writing. It's great for asking questions too.
Yeah.
Right? But for writing, it just bugs me. Although I always laugh that it rates much higher. You have those scoring editorial mechanisms, and it always ranks higher when it generates it than my writing does. But
I don't know. I think there's something about, as someone who's tried to write all her life, went to school for it, I think there's also a misunderstanding of like what makes for compelling content, especially if you think about it. We're writing about banks, and so this content doesn't need to be more complex or,
That's right.
harder to understand. So all you and I try to do every single day is make a hard topic easier to understand. And AI text, I think, almost goes in the opposite direction, because it wants to come off as smart. And for me, all I try to do is to be understood with a person, with what my reader knows, versus like kind of trying to sound fancy.
Yep. And I used to love the M dash, and now that ChatGPT is so good at that M dash, I've taken it out of my writings, because
you could probably use like a period, comma, or a semicolon. That's my favorite.
Semicolon? Yeah. See, I'm not a semicolon person, but I'm learning that, like, if I can't do the M dash, I might as well do the semicolon.
So SouthState recently had a deposit conference, and deposits are super important to banks, but I didn't realize they were so important we needed to have a whole conference around them. Tell me what this conference was about.
Yeah, so all my whole career, I've always thought, so one of my first bosses, she told me that, deposits are the most important thing. Like, if you do anything right in banking, gather deposits. And I didn't really understand it then. Then a couple of years later, I started to dawn on me. And I said, yes, that's, as you actually look at profitability, you can never go wrong gathering cheap deposits. And it's always struck me as weird that, and to my earlier point, we have chief lending officers, chief banking officers, credit officers, but we rarely have a chief deposit officer, right? We rarely have a deposit committee. And so no one's really minding deposits.
No.
Usually left to the branch. And so I always thought we needed a deposit conference to highlight the importance of deposits and to highlight analytics. And deposits seem so simple.
They kind of do seem simple.
Right? It just balances in a rate.
Yeah.
It should be, that's nothing compared to, a CMO or a CLO. But if you think about it, deposit's really, really complicated, that a lot of things affect that deposit performance, and you have things like duration and convexity, just as you do in a bond and a loan, but you also have these other influences, how CDs impact money market accounts, how it affects, performance, and if you throw interest checking, what that does, and if you start to put a rate on your website, what that does. So all these things have this interplay, and I think it's a complicated enough topic to demand a separate deposit conference.
Yeah.
So we partnered with S&P Global, just had 100 seats open. We sold out. We'll do it again next year, I think in Chicago, right around the same time this month next year. And it was well attended. We appreciate everyone that came.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about how deposits have they feel like, I don't want to say they're evolving, but the different types of deposits, how banks use them, how regulators thought about them, obviously. And then fintech came in and was like kind of supercharged that and added this like element of technology or digitization that for me, like, has been really interesting and fun. But And then to have rates added, like this whole time, rates were not high enough to actually almost be a variable. And then rates came in and I was like, oh my God, guys, this is, I've never seen this. Like I've never seen a bank fail because of deposit run. And then I saw it happen in like 24 hours. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting that you chose now to have a deposit conference rather than like 5 years ago or even like 2023, right?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we chose that is in anticipation of falling rates, the time to really focus on deposits is when rates are low and falling.
Sure.
Because now you can cure some of the issues. You can drive out your rate sensitive customers. You can create new products. You can do a bunch of things. And I always say that rate is absolutely the last thing you should ever market. Try everything else, anything about service, anything about product development, brand, whatever you need to do, anything, safety, but market rate last. And so now with lower rate, people are paying less attention to it. Banks are, not relying on it. Hopefully we won't see that 6% money market account like we've been seeing in different spots. And now's the time to kind of restructure and, make your deposit base better, less interest rate sensitive and better performing.
And it's funny too, because I feel like the rate shock kind of was the education for a whole generation of bankers. Yes. Like we won't have this again, hopefully for 10 more years, because we all painfully learned about both, like AOCI and the securities, right? And the, as rates rise, bond yields fall. Like just hold that in your head the whole time. And then the other thing too is like, also, the last time we were in a rising rate environment, we did not have like all this technology and the internet to do the shopping for us, right? We were using newspapers.
Yeah, and so now we have agents. So, things speed up even more. And so that's been real interesting. I play around with, different agents at the side to have, it search for me every week. It goes out and says, this bank is the highest paying bank that you can open up an account in seconds, right? And
do you do it? Do you use the AI agent?
I do. And so part of that is it's interesting to see how the agent interacts with the bank website and also how far an agent can get in opening up an account at a bank.
Yeah. How much how often can it switch your accounts? Do you actually get like enough? Is it the money there long enough that it actually gets interest?
So the answer is yes. And in fact, with the cash bonus offer, you can optimize that.
Oh my
and
gosh.
With high yield money market accounts in particular, you can move it around. And so, as I always say, if I'm your deposit customer, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, that is some very hot money.
Exactly.
You are someone's nightmare.
Yeah, and now that I can automate it, it's fantastic, right?
So I asked you if you used AI in your writing, and the answer is no. Apparently you do use it a little bit in money management. And we have talked about how SouthState is using AI and some of the early AI projects that you guys had done. How is SouthState using AI today, and what have you guys learned from using it?
Yeah, so right now we have our flagship product, Tate.
Right.
Canal Dawson, our IT department, and Barnes and a couple others focused on that, created that early on. Probably we've worked on it for 3 years, rolled it out not too long ago, but that is the go-to LLM, ChatGPT within the Microsoft Azure environment that we use as our base LLM, our go-to. We overlay that with Copilot, and now we're looking at going from what we call point solutions. Every vendor, for example, having some AI layer in their application to looking at more enterprise. So how can we use Tate, our LLM, across the whole enterprise to solve things like whether it's fraud or customer profitability or, optimizing, cybersecurity, whatever it is. We want to try to standardize that and do the same thing with agents. And so right now, we're just looking at the best way to govern that. I think we have all the basics, and now we're trying to take that to the next level to try to have that AI gateway and AI automated governance level. So, that handles more than just one AI application. We now can look at an AI application on a monthly basis and see the drift, manage that accordingly, look at the risk, and then look at how our employees or customers down the road are using prompts across the board. So that's kind of our new push overall.
And what have you guys learned from this process? Like, are you learning a lot about just how to govern a thing that isn't a human, or are you learning about the technology that you need to make sure that you can use Tate in more places across your bank?
Yeah, all the above. I mean, one, there's clearly productivity gains everywhere we turn, so that's not the issue. And I think that the productivity gains are big enough that you can make a business case for almost anything to do with, traditional AI or generative AI or agentic AI. So I think that is the easy part. The hard part is that it is kind of tough to govern. Like, what is a model? How much you push that? We look at things on a use case basis. So how wide is that use case, and when do you have a new use case? I think we've had some big philosophical arguments over that. Many vendors, call me up or just turn it on. Bloomberg is an example of a vendor that just turned it on and said, you didn't even tell us. I mean, didn't even crow about it. Some vendors crow about it, like, hey, we got new AI, it's turned on. We're like, no, wait a minute, you don't understand. That's the 14 hours of work that we now have to do to just look at where the risks are.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the part that we're just, trying to get to understand. The vendors have been able to say, hey, we're coming out with this new AI, check it out, it's in a sandbox, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. We really appreciate that type of vendor partnership and vendor thoughtfulness, where many of them haven't done that. And so we're learning how to deal with different vendors, and some of these vendors don't even know where their LLM stores data or how they store data, or if we have to delete data, how that deletes, the retention policies and security. All that is just like pulling teeth out of some of our vendors to try to get the answer. So we're trying to learn that, and then trying to learn, governance and what is the actual true risk, right? And when an LLM suggests to do X, Y, Z, where does our responsibility as a human, as an employee, start and stop by saying, no, that's not going to work? Or if it does, are we now, making that employee dumber to not understand the risk? Or, is there ways, things we can do to stop that? And I think one of our answers is training. So, I think we're trying to raise our training game across the board to make sure every employee kind of understands where the risks are in dealing with generative AI and agentic AI, and then, how to be smarter about working with them.
Okay, so your initial answer to the question was actually my next question, which was you had mentioned vendors adding AI to products makes your job harder, not easier initially. Yes. And it sounds like it's because you basically have to go back to the drawing board and redo due diligence, but have also then be not just hey, where do you keep the data now? But how, you added AI. How are you watching the AI, right?
That's right. And many of the vendors, it's worse that many of the vendors are just throwing AI at it. And I'm like, this isn't really helpful, but you're causing me a bunch of heartache. And if you don't know the answers, then I know you haven't done the risk analysis. So, you really create this additional layer of problems. And the fact is that if they use a third-party, AI tool, and the LLM stores data somewhere, well, where is that somewhere? And again, it's retention, et cetera. So that creates a problem. Microsoft's been fantastic, but many other vendors have been, problematic. And they say, well, you have a SOX report from us, or you have due diligence material. I'm like, yeah, we have it on you, we have it on your application, but we don't have it on your LLM. What can you tell us about your LLM? And a lot of times we get a bunch of blank stares.
Yeah, that's funny. And then with training, it is also interesting too, because if you think about maybe AI elevating someone's work, now it's almost like you're kind of the manager of the AIs, and so you have to be trained in some of those managerial tasks. Or I think about how you have to be kind of an expert enough that you should be able to check the AI's work, right? You should be able to be no, that's not fully right, and I know it because of X, Y, and Z. And if someone doesn't have the years of experience or wasn't doing that job initially, but now it's doing part of that a little bit of a different job because of AI, they have to have that knowledge base in their head, or they have to know where they would go find it.
Yeah, and while I complain about M dashes and bullet points, when someone sends me, a memo or a white paper or something that hey, here's our position paper on this product, and I see a bunch of AI generated crap in there, I'm like, hopefully you check that. And so I spot check it, and it really irks me when you find out that, the employee didn't check it, or, the banker should have known better and just didn't take the time, maybe knew better, but just didn't take the time to check. And that, makes all our jobs harder. So to your point, I actually think we have to be smarter employees, smarter bankers, using AI than not.
Yeah. I'm stunned to find out, as a journalist who believes that if I am wrong about something, it will haunt me professionally and impact my ability to be employable. And there are people who are just using AI and not checking it. And then like it's super wrong. And then they have no professional consequences. And I'm like, I thought God would strike me down with lightning, right. Like if I would spell people's names wrong, and that would just be like typos, you know?
And then you use the excuse like, oh, that was AI. I'm like, that's not an excuse, right?
No, that's even worse. That's somehow worse.
Right? So I thought it was your work, and if you're not checking, don't blame AI after. But that's a pet peeve of ours, it sounds like.
So, what are your thoughts on open banking? There has been so much developments in the the Section 1033, which can be open banking, but there's also, broader applications or broader market practices for open banking.
Yeah, open banking is one that I thought I had some clear thoughts on, and now with the fall of 1033, I don't know where we stand with, JP Morgan Chase being able to extract a bunch of money out of Plaid. I'm scratching my head. I'm part jealous, part angry. I don't know how to think about that. I can tell you that, at 1033, it was going to be the future. Now I'm not so sure. I thought 1033 was very myopic in its focus and its execution. So I'm happy to see that go. If it came back and actually served the purpose of making banking more competitive for everyone, I guess I'd be more supportive of that. Right now, I think we're in no man's land, and I think we'll be in no man's land for a while, where we'll have open banking to the extent that, it's going to, I think make money for banks and make money for fintechs. But other than that, it's going to be an issue.
Do you think that pay by bank is tenable in the United States, is something that, consumers will broadly adopt? Is that something you guys would want to talk to your customers about?
Yeah, pay by bank is, I think, a hot topic, and one that I'm hoping catches on. I'm not sure when the inflection point is going to be. It makes so much sense for some of our customers, merchants, for example, not to have to pay 2-3% on merchant transactions and be able to pay by bank. Putting the account number and the routing number, the ABA number, into your app is problematic. Getting that into the point of sale system is problematic. We have these problems to solve. We will solve them. Stablecoin or tokenized deposits may be the answer to that. But, instant payments are definitely part of the answer. Sooner or later, we'll evolve. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be as quick as I'd like it to be. But I think that's an idea whose time has come.
I went to South Korea a couple of years ago. My friend, we bought some food from a vendor, like a small dollar transaction. She didn't have cash, and she did pay by bank, and it was pretty easy. But I think that it's because they don't have very many banks, and so it's pretty easy to have someone's not account number, but a code. And then what she would do is she typed it in her phone, and then she showed it to the vendor. Was like, "Is this you?" And the vendor was like, "Yeah." And it was that easy. And
if you're in India, no problem with their UPI. They haven't figured it out. It's a QR code. It's an automatic payment. It's free for everyone. It's very efficient. It drives commerce. It's done wonders for that country and that economy. And I think it's just a matter of time before we remove that friction in this economy. And it still incenses me that I got to hand over my credit card. They take it somewhere at the restaurant behind closed doors, bring it back to me, and I have to go through this awkward dance of signing and tipping. Just make it like an Uber experience.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on crypto and stablecoin?
Yeah, crypto I think is the best solution that I never asked for. So, speculative investment, great. It's not great for payments. That is, the Bitcoins of the world, Ethereum's. Stablecoin I think is a little different topic. I think the Genius Act, if the intent was to strengthen the U.S. dollar and to, turbocharge commerce, I think it's going to do that. And I think every bank has to kind of pay attention to what their stablecoin plans are and how they plan to participate. Because I do think it's going to be a shift of more assets to U.S. dollar denominated cash holdings, stablecoin, and it's, I think, going to be a game changer for some banks.
Are you worried that it's going to pull deposits out of the system the way that some regulators and academics have predicted?
Yeah, I think that's a misnomer. The money still stays in the system. It's still in treasuries or still in bank deposits. So even though it's in a stable coin, it's still invested back in the banking system. So it's not going anywhere. But what I think it does, right? What I think it does is shift it to those banks that have stable coin reserve management capabilities. And so, to the extent that it's not held in deposits, it will possibly drain deposits from some banks for sure. Just as crypto has already, and fintechs have already, and Starbucks has already. That Starbucks money on the Starbucks card is still in the banking system. It's just not at my bank anymore.
Have you used any stable coins?
Yeah, so I play around with both crypto and stable coins quite a bit. Still early stages, not I can't tell you it's the be all end all, but I think if you're moving money cross borders, there's a lot of advantages to that. There's a lot of advantages of just holding a stable coin and being able to walk up to a foreign ATM and get your money in pounds or get your money in yen or, Canadian dollar. I think that's an advantage as opposed to having me move money into Canadian dollar and then move money back to US dollar and then translate that back into Mexican peso the next time I go to Mexico, etc. Just keep it in stable coin and access the ATM, for example.
Chris, you have such complex financial transactions.
Well, I do push the envelope. Just, I'm in that business, so.
So technology is a big theme on Banker to Banker. And we hear that it's sometimes difficult to learn about tech and do your job when you work at a bank. How do you educate yourself on technology other than apparently go to Mexico and then Canada? Yeah,
so it's a constant weekend endeavor for the most part. I don't have enough time to think about it during the week. But during the weekend, coming up Friday, Saturday afternoon, I spent a lot of time, reading up, listening to different podcasts, reading different blogs, reading different articles, trying to keep current. Again, I'm blessed where I get to go around a bunch of different conferences, so I get to talk to a lot of people. So I always kind of check in to say, hey, Q2, Pfizer, what are you guys doing? What's on your mind? And, on Money 2020 is a fantastic place to see what the cutting edge is working on. So I get to run around that conference talking to, 50, 60 people a day about what they're working on. And I'm always like, that's a great application, or no, that's never going to work,
It's funny because I've been trying to think about how do I use AI and how do I learn about tech, and I do get a lot of stuff from blogs. I feel like I read a lot of stuff that I disagree with, or I'm like, this is not a problem I've ever encountered in my life. But it is it's kind of good to know what's out there, and then it's funny to think because I care about the points travel stuff I've learned about different tech in that space, right? So then I'm like, oh, that's definitely a use case in the searching and things like that. And that's been kind of interesting. But it is hard to just keep up.
Yes. Quite a bit. And and you got to separate what's real and what's just hype and what's someone writing about it. So I do always try to go hands-on whenever I can. So I do, whether it's the agents or whether it's a new payment app or whether it's, I've been trying to open up a account at New Bank, in Latin America to try to figure out what they're offering, but Chime, etc. I try to get around and experience the technology myself. Yeah.
So what excites you about the economy and the future?
I do think the combination of AI for sure, AI is going to change the game.
You're excited about
AI?
Any
number of ways. Yeah, so I'm very excited about AI and what that means. I do think it's going to make us smarter, more productive. So I'm optimistic as soon as we get over this governance, friction and we try to figure that out. I do think payments is going to be, whether it's stablecoin or just the rise of instant payments, pay by bank. That I'm excited about that. I think identity is another big one. One of my problems in life is, I don't think we deal with identity right. So a lot of the problems, right, we have in banking are a result of not knowing who our sender is and who our receiver is. And if we can solve this problem, we wouldn't have to worry about this middle stuff. And so that middle stuff I think causes a lot of fraud problems, synthetic ID, et cetera. So hopefully we can solve that problem. I want to get rid of checks. I'm excited about getting rid of checks. I don't understand.
That feels very close. That feels achievable.
I feel like I don't understand why that's still a thing, why people are running around with some paper dollar and, with a signature and your account number and your address and all your information on it, and you never know what's going to happen when you have instant payment rails available to you. That's, encrypted and secure, et cetera. So stuff like that, I can't wait to see the end of it.
I have gotten 2 checks in the last 30 days. And every time I'm like, you didn't tell me you were going to put hundreds of dollars in the mail. And I'm always worried someone's going to steal my checks. Right. Hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I feel it's only a matter of time, frankly.
Happens all the time. And we have all locked boxes in my neighborhood. And every, 2 years or 3 years, we have a gang that comes through and just breaks open everyone's mailbox. And you're still losing checks. I'm like, why are you losing checks? No one should be sending checks.
Okay, so what worries you about the economy in the future?
Oh, man, I got lots of worries. I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. I worry about, the current administration and all the chaos that it creates. I think, for all the good ideas, I worry about the execution of them. So web tariffs are one of them. Inflation, driven by tariffs and driven by, tighter labor markets, et cetera, worry me that we have a great economy and a great system, and I don't want to see us screw it up. So that's a big worry of mine.
It took us... the one big takeaway I have is if you have a big enough recession, it might take a long time to work through the unemployment. And that was seen as a bad thing last time to get the economy going again. But we did get 0% interest rates for 8 years.
Too long.
So there were trade-offs.
We had too much stimulus and rates looked too long.
No. In 2019, that was fine. 2018, 2019. Do you remember they would raise the rate by 25 basis points, and then Greece would have a meltdown, and they would pause for 3 more meetings. It was crazy. And then the 75, that was a different type of crazy, but I just remember rates used to be so slow you wouldn't even notice them. Okay, so what is your favorite non-bank topic to talk about?
Favorite non-bank topic to talk about? Well, I have a lot of passions, and I go down a bunch of rabbit holes. Jiu-jitsu is my current favorite topic to talk about.
Why?
I'm in love with that sport. It's one of my passions. Skiing's another one. I could talk to days about that. F1. I was late on the F1 train.
I noticed it started appearing in your writing.
I am now a convert. I am now, I'll talk F1 to anybody. So I could go on and on, but.
Are you going to go to a race?
I'm working on that. Yes, it's on my bucket list. It has moved up. I never understood why anybody had wanted to see cars go around a track, and now it makes sense now that I understand it a little more.
I know nothing about F1, but I was in Mexico City for a wedding last year during the F1 race, and it ruined hotel prices. Yes. But I heard it's a very affordable 3-day ticket if you are looking for a destination to go to. And Mexico City is a great city. And you could use your stablecoins there.
There you go. Yeah, Mexico is fantastic. Okay.
What is the smallest bank-related hill you'll die on?
Never had that question before in my life. The smallest hill that I would die on is... I don't know if it's that small. Accountability gets me.
That's not small at all.
I can think small.
Come on. Okay, petty, small. Something that checks. I think checks is a really good one. My smallest hill is that there's no definition of a core deposit.
Okay.
There's only there's only a definition of what is not a core deposit. And I think this comes up a couple of times. Well, now it's important, but it comes up because the call report has terms of other types of deposits. And then if it's not another type of deposit, it's just included as core. And I think that definition, I don't know who it serves, but I think when we look at that definition, we might miss other things like embedded rate sensitivity or, for a little bit, did this thing come from Bass middleware? And could it be just shushed or swooshed out of the bank if we unplug and replug into a different bank. But like, this is not a problem. It's not even like it's definitely not a problem now, but I want to talk about this and no one wants to talk about it with me because we just have to talk about the other problems that it produces, right?
All right. I would agree with that. So in that context, I'll go with my smallest hill to die on, bank names. Don't understand for the life of me why just ask your 6-year-old what to name your bank if you're having that much problems with it, instead of the most common names of, First Bank, Community Bank, etc.
I love bank names so much. I'm going to do a ranking of all First State banks. I'm going to get all of them, and then I'm going to rank them by which First State bank is the best First State bank, because there's so many of them.
So many, and for the life of me, I that's the one that I'd love to see change. That I'll die on, and it seems petty, like it matters, but that's one that I think we should have just a modicum of more creativity in this industry.
Well, Chris, this was so fun. I am so glad that you were my first guest on Bank Nerd Corner, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much. Always enjoy talking to you. This is going to take off. I can't wait.
Yeah, and I'll see you at Money 2020 is what it sounds like.
See you there.